And for more on this story, I want to bring in CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. Rebecca, just want to begin by sort of clarifying, Kimmel has not been fired, right? The show is suspended, but we've seen this trend happening across the country. Some Republican lawmakers are even calling for companies to fire or censure employees for bringing up Kirk's sometimes divisive rhetoric. Does Kimmel or anyone caught up in this have any recourse?
You know, they might have recourse in a situation like this. As you know, you said in your introduction, there is no First Amendment right if these are purely private parties. But when the government uses its substantial official power to threaten private actors who don't act in a certain way with regard to speech, that can be seen as the government, it's what's called jawboning, which is essentially using its official power to pressure private parties to fire people or suspend people due to their speech. And if that's the case, then there could be some kind of legal recourse in claiming that there's been a First Amendment violation.
So, Rebecca, earlier today, the FCC chairman has said Kimmel appeared to be, quote, directly misleading the American people. I wonder what kind of legal standing would the FCC have for taking action against ABC when we see opinion shows on both sides of the aisle making far-reaching comments, almost weekly?
Right. I mean, the question of whether there's been a misrepresentation, obviously there is some control over quality on the airwaves, and that is something that the FCC can control, but it does so gently, in part exactly as you said, because you don't want the government to be turned into a truth commission. There has to be a clear misstatement made with malice in order for there to be any kind of action on the FCC based on an untruth given through the airwaves, because there is such subjectivity about what counts as what is true or untrue in these circumstances.
Larry Sabato joins us now. He is the founder and director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Larry, it's great to see you. I wonder if you think this move signals a shift in free speech in American media, or do you think, it's specific to Jimmy Kimmel's show?
Well, almost certainly not, because this is part of a larger pattern. It's a pattern of intimidation by the Trump administration to big media, to critics of all sorts, to universities, to law firms. Look, they're sending a message to people who have been tough on Donald Trump that you're going to pay for being tough on Donald Trump. It's self-censorship they want. They can't reach all the critics. They can't punish all the critics. But what they can do is to pick some very prominent people like Jimmy Kimmel, make them suffer for the sins that they have committed, supposedly, and send the message, therefore, to everybody else. You'd better watch what you say.
Larry, to be very clear, this was a decision by ABC, right? It was a private corporation. But it happened just hours after we heard from the FCC chair. Do you believe that the government played a role in ABC, making the choice that it did?
Is the Pope American? Of course. You'd have to be a fool to believe that these actions were completely separate. They clearly were not. And look, business is business, and they decided that for the future of their business, in which they're seeking a super mega media merger, they had better stay on the FCC's good side and on the Trump administration's good side. I get it. Everybody gets the business angle to this, but it's a major change in the way we approach news media coverage and critical coverage of an incumbent president. It's really unprecedented. You can point to several things that have occurred in American history, but so many of them are happening at once. And just a few months into the Trump administration, they really have come down hard on just about all the key institutions in American society and politics.
Larry, back in January, President Trump signed an executive order looking to restore freedom of speech and end government censorship. I want to play what he had to say right before he did that. Listen.
And I'll also sign an executive order to immediately end federal government censorship of the American people. In America, we believe in free speech.
So help us make sense of this, because clearly the president said that he was going to end government censorship. He said, he did not want the politicalization of words, essentially. And based on what you just laid out, I wonder if you think there's been some sort of shift, or how do you make sense of what's happening today versus back in January?
Consistency is not Donald Trump's strong suit. That's part of it. Another piece of this, though, and it goes back to his elections, winning or losing, it's that there are no rules except the rules that help him at any given time. And that's the way many of his minions look at it as well. Again, politically, maybe that makes sense, but it doesn't to the society as a whole. It doesn't to the political system. It's hypocrisy. And it ought to disturb everybody. Of course, it doesn't. We live in surprisingly quiescent times. And I think it's going to go on until somebody is able to stand up and stop it in some way. And that can't happen until after the 2026 midterm elections. And it won't happen unless Democrats win at least one House of Congress. That may or may not occur.
Quickly, Larry, because you brought up the politics of all of this, I wonder if this is a win for either side. Is there a chance that Kimmel becomes some type of martyr?
I think he already has, and he's not the first. Obviously, there was another late night host, as you well know, Stephen Colbert, who was also ousted. And I realize that's connected to your network, but it's hard to believe that the fact of the Trump administration's feelings about Colbert didn't come into that decision. So look, there have been two key firings of sorts. One was a suspension, the other was the end of the show, but practically speaking, they were firings. And after a while, there's a pattern, and it's not just a pattern with late night comics. It's also a pattern with how Trump approaches networks and the money that he got from CBS and the money that he got from ABC, the money he's trying to get from the Wall Street Journal, the money he's trying to get from the New York Times. This is pure intimidation. Really, it's intimidation.
And Ian, I also want to ask you about your take on the situation with Jimmy Kimmel, because you've been making some posts about it in similar situations that you've noted seeing abroad.
Well, yes, of course. A big part of the challenge of what's happening in the United States right now is that it is seen as much less reliable by America's allies, by America's friends, America's partners. There's a lot of hedging going on. That's not only true in terms of the biggest thing that Trump has done, which is put these massive tariffs on that we haven't seen since the 1930s, but also in terms of America's willingness to stand by rule of law. Its support for freedom of speech, for individual liberties, for human rights, for the promotion of democracy. And most leaders that I talk to around the world that have trusted the United States feel like the U.S. increasingly does not stand for those things. So I do think that has a consequence. And when those leaders come to the United States, and this for many of them, it'll be the first time that a lot of these heads of state have actually been in the U.S. since they've seen a lot of these actions coming out of Washington, it will have an impact on them.